intellect, strength for your spirit, balm for your heart. The Healing and Peace Show with Thomas Schmier, LMFT, where you get wise counsel based on sacred scripture, sacred tradition, and sound science. The Healing and Peace Show, your Catholic guide through the trials of life.
Do you have a love-hate relationship with food? Are you looking for a way to apply Christian principles to help improve your relationship with food? Whether you binge only on occasion or have a full-blown eating disorder where you binge and or purge regularly, today's guest can help you. She not only has recovered from an eating disorder, she has inspired millions along the way. She's an author and speaker with a bachelor's in fine arts who has received certificates from the Nutritarian Educational Institute. Most importantly, she's endorsed by our most recent guest, New York Times bestseller, and creator of the Nutritarian diet, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emily Boller. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here today. I feel honored to be a part of your show.
Honored to have you.
Yes.
Well, we may as well get right into it.
Mm-hmm.
Holding up your book here, I don't know if it's out yet as we're recording it, but it will be by the time I put this out. I might put this out in a few months. And it's called Starved to Obesity. And can you tell us a little bit about the title? What does that mean, Starved to Obesity?
Yes, I always tell people I dieted since I was age 6. And I was always starving myself, restricting. My mother put me on very restrictive diets as a child. And growing up, I was like starving myself. The next diet, the next whatever it was I was doing. And the lack of nutrients was creating in me just that desire to eat all the time. And now, because I'm fully nourished with lots of high nutrient foods, that desire to just eat all the time has gone away because my body is finally filled with nutrients that it needs instead of, being, I said I was really malnourished and, was morbidly obese because of it.
I first learned about you mentioning morbidly obese. I first learned about you when I saw a picture of how you used to look in the book Eat to Live, and that was over 6 years ago. And so to me, you're a celebrity because you're in the book.
Yeah. I say I'm a celebrity because I've done everything wrong in my whole life, but I've learned from it.
Exactly. That's very humble. I appreciate that. So I've been reading your writings along the ways. I remember the old Disease Proof blog that I don't really think is around anymore, but you were contributing to that and interviewing people, but I didn't know until I read your book about what was really going on underneath the food addiction. Really, can you tell us about that?
Sure. When I was in high school, well, I'll back up. When I was chunky as a little preschooler, and so I was put on a diet at age 6. And was given a goose egg if I gained weight and a plus sign if I lost weight, and sent to school with diet food. So I got in that dieting mentality, that focus on what my body looked like at a very young age, an aversion to scales. I didn't want to know what I weighed because this was as a 6-year-old, and I didn't want to know what the scales would weigh. And so I got caught up in that dieting mentality, and by the time I was in 8th grade, I was still really chunky, and I literally starved myself with just an orange for lunch every day at school, and I got just enough so I could fit into a pair of jeans by the time I was in high school, because prior to that I couldn't fit into jeans. And there were a lot of name calling. Children who are overweight are the brunt of the playground. Called names constantly, and on the bus, everywhere. If you have any kind of physical, appearance that's different, kids are really mean. Well, So high school, when I went to high school, I fit in for the first time in my life. I wasn't discriminated against. I fit into the activities. I fit into the fashion. I got to wear clothes that all the other girls wore. And so I fit right in. And then my senior year, I took it too far and I got very thin to the point that I was diagnosed with anorexia my senior year of high school. And, you know, one thing back in the late 70s when I was diagnosed with that, counseling wasn't something that was, at least in my hometown, it wasn't emphasized. And so my parents pretty much just brushed it under the rug. And then I went into binge eating in college, but I dieted. So I never was overweight during those years of college because I knew how to diet. So I would binge eat and diet and exercise. So I was able to keep the weight off by purging. I never threw up, but I purged by exercising a lot and dieting. And then when I got married and babies came along, I just started binge eating and binge eating and binge eating. And at that point, by having little babies, I couldn't just go off and go exercise the calories off. So I continued to gain weight till I was 100 pounds overweight. And by the age of 42, I pretty much landed, I had chest pain and I had a heart catheterization. And as I was diagnosed with heart disease and high blood pressure, prediabetes. And I knew in my early 40s that I was sitting on a ticking bomb. So that's basically my story until I discovered Dr. Fuhrman. And when I started following Eat to Live, it was basically less than a year and I had 100 pounds off. And I tell people prior to finding Dr. Fuhrman, I was probably eating 200 points a day. Points is what Dr. Fuhrman refers to as the nutrient scoring of food. And I was probably eating 200 points a day. Today, I eat probably between 3,000 and 5,000 nutrient points a day. And I don't calculate them. Yeah, I don't do that. But that's an average of how much my body is nourished now.
Big difference.
Yes.
So with the points, people on this show don't know what that is. They don't necessarily know these things. Yeah.
Yes. Dr. Fuhrman, he has, it's called the food scoring guide. And basically every food in there has a point system. For instance, kale scores 1,000. Versus like a piece of white bread, it's real low. Maybe it scores maybe a 5. But different foods have different scores of values. It's their phytochemicals, their micronutrients, what they have to nourish our body. And so, you know, that whole mentality as I was growing up, it was never about the nutrients. It was always about what you can't have. And when I started eating this way, for the first time in my life, I started focusing on all the foods I could have. And that's when I followed this little book. He had a book out called Eat for Health, and he still has that. And it had a smaller version of the food scoring guide inside of that. And I remember every meal, I would look up the chart and try to find the foods that had the most nutrients. And I was like always focused on getting nutrients in my body. And that obviously the weight came off, but because my focus was on eating instead of not eating and not having certain foods, I was so focused on, okay, there's, you know, a banana is good, lettuce, you know, tomatoes, and my plate would be really colorful. And being a visual artist that I am, I'm a painter. I love colors. So all of a sudden, my plate went from, you know, a plate full of cottage cheese and all the white things the diet foods, the diet pudding, the diet jello, the diet soda. It went from all the bland colors to all of a sudden I had blueberries and raspberries and kale and lettuce and just beautiful colors. And so, yeah, I say I'm just well nourished now. And the weight is secondary because when you are well nourished, the pounds just start coming off.
I remember reading something that you wrote that I think it was you, that you had gone to a party of some sort. I don't know, maybe it was Thanksgiving dinner. I just don't know what it was. And people thought you had this big salad that you were going to start serving out to everyone, and that was your salad.
Yes, yes, and that's another thing. All my life I was restricting my portions. Everything is about portion control. I was in programs where you weighed and measured every morsel of food that you put in your body. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to weigh and measure and have everything portion controlled. I mean, my salad, see this bowl here? That's a normal size of salad for me now. And you can eat a lot of salad. Yes. And people think, oh my goodness, is that enough for 5 people? It's like, no, this is one salad. But for the first time in your life, you get to be full.
Yeah, I remember someone, saw me on getting started with this diet, and I'm eating a tomato like an apple, and he thought that was really funny, and he told his dad about it. Look at him. But that's
Yes.
We can eat a whole tomato by ourselves. It's okay. It's not wrong.
But isn't it funny? You have a Snickers candy bar out, and people think that's fine. But you have an apple, or I mean a tomato. That looks odd.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now, underneath, when we see someone who's morbidly obese, and I think, it's easy to judge them. You're wearing your flaws on your sleeve. Like everyone knows, we all get to have, those of us who are not morbidly obese, we get to hide our sins and hide our pathologies. But when you're morbidly obese, it's out there for everyone. But I think we need to learn to ourselves have humility and see that that person's hurting. And so I think when you were weighed your most, you were going through something with your son. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, my at that point, my son, my middle child, when he was 11 years old, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. For those who don't know what type 1 diabetes is, usually kids get it when they're in childhood. It's called juvenile diabetes too. It's where the body no longer produces insulin at all. It's an autoimmune disease where the beta cells are attacked and they don't produce insulin. So at 11, he was diagnosed. And by the time he was about 14 or 15, when he would eat like donuts or M&Ms or anything that was not healthy for him as far as the sugar goes, and then if he did not give enough insulin for it, he would get a medical delirium and actually symptoms of psychosis. And so 4 days after I started eating this way, we were on a family vacation up on Lake Michigan. And unbeknownst to me, he was in the back of the van on the way up there. He had eaten a 1-pound bag of M&Ms all by himself without any insulin coverage. And so by the time we were at Lake Michigan, his mind just was gone. And he ended up in a hospital in our hometown of Fort Wayne. And then he got worse at that point and then had to go to Cincinnati, which is 3 hours away. But that was 4 days after I started eating this way. And I had a lot of challenges because we were just we went from crisis to crisis to crisis. Then he would be in and out of hospitals, especially during his teen years. Everywhere he went, youth groups at church, everywhere, they served pizza and candy and, cookies. And it was just really hard for him to stick with the foods he needed to eat to be stable. And he did good most of the time, but the few times that he went on a junk food binge, we all paid dearly for it, and especially himself.
And how did that ultimately turn out for him?
Yes, when he was 21, he ended up dying by suicide. And right before the funeral, I was looking through his car and I found all the receipts and packages from all the fast food restaurants that are nearby our house and all the empty wrappers. And in his trash can were empty sacks of honey roasted peanut butter and, or yeah, cookies, really cheap cereal and big liters of soda. And he went on a major junk food binge, and he would go into it. It was called metabolic encephalopathy. It was the big long name for it, but he wouldn't be in his right mind, and he ended up taking his life then.
Life. Okay.
Yes.
At least
So
my condolences to you and
thank
to
you.
your husband, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there, have you had to deal with shame, kind of blaming yourself for this? And if so, how did that play into the food addiction?
Not so much. We had a good counselor during this time, and that was the one thing he stressed is like, we did the best we could as parents, but the one thing that happened though after he died, I did okay for really the first year. I was in shock after he died, and I mean I had symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and I went into a deep depression. But that second year, I went into a very deep depression. It just, I didn't have the desire to go to the grocery store. I would cry randomly, have these meltdowns. I wasn't like that normally. But I learned later it's a part of the deep grieving when you lose a child like that. And so, anyhow, I didn't go back to eating pizza and the things that are unhealthy for the body, but I started gravitating towards oatmeal and peanut butter and whole wheat tortillas with peanut butter on. I started eating things that were no longer high nutrient foods, and I lost my taste for salads. And I started gaining weight as a result. So it's not just the junk food we eat, it's the low nutrient foods that cause us to gain the weight because it kicks in that addiction again. And I started binge eating on, low nutrient foods. I would make ice cream out of bananas and put cocoa powder in it, have chocolate ice cream, and I would just eat a whole container of that as a meal, and I didn't care. But I learned later that, it's a part of the grieving process. You become apathetic, unfortunately, when you're severely depressed.
I can understand that. Yeah,
So,
I think a lot of people eat probably stuff that's normally good for you, like what you said, ice cream, not truly ice cream, but a frozen banana blended.
sure.
And they're just eating the wrong proportions of things. And so they're eating a healthier diet, but not the healthiest diet.
Sure.
Right now, I'm doing pretty well, but I'm eating too many beans. And it sounds silly to people who aren't accustomed to this diet, like, oh, he's eating too many beans, that's really bad. But
Yeah.
it's not number one on the list.
Sure.
I probably have an extra 5 pounds, maybe 10. I don't know, just because of the beans. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for me to kind of change my ways?
Yes, I think a game changer. Dr. Fuhrman has that the equation, health equals nutrients over calories. I think instead of, you want to focus on the greens and the vegetables first. Fill up on those first. Have some beans. What I would do, I always tell people who are having a hard time, it's okay to measure. If you're having a hard time overeating on a particular food, it's okay to set boundaries with that food. So, perhaps stick to just a cup of beans at lunchtime and a cup of beans at the dinner time so that your body gets accustomed to the smaller amounts. And it's not a forever thing, maybe, a week or two to where your stomach understands, okay, that's a good size of beans for my body. And psychologically, you could eat probably 5 cups. I don't know how many you're eating right now, but your body doesn't need that many. So, I always tell people when they're starting off, it's a good idea, especially if you're overeating on a particular food, just to sort of get a little bit of boundary. It's not something you have to be real strict with, but you know, and fill up on the greens and the vegetables and the fruits, the berries, the G bombs. Get those in first. Then if you still need more beans, okay, let's wait until dinner to have more beans, and
Right.
see if you can hold off. So
Yeah,
sometimes it's just more in the mind you need those
I
beans.
think you're right.
Hmm.
There's an anxiety. It's like, what if I don't eat these beans, then I might not get that full feeling. And if I don't get the full feeling, then I'm going to brush my teeth and all that, and then I don't want to go back and eat more later, and it'll, like, it's just some weird anxiety. Whereas, I'm going to bed in a few hours. I don't need all the calories. I'm going to be just fine.
Sure.
So just limit it, and
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Yes, I would limit it and make sure you're getting your nuts and
Yeah.
seeds at each meal, because that helps you too but yeah, sometimes it's just in our minds. We've been accustomed to a habit. There was one point in one of the crisis situations I was in with Daniel, our son. I was just putting cocoa powder on everything, my oatmeal and my ice cream, everything that was sort of a sweet, not on lettuce, but I was putting cocoa powder. I mean, pure cocoa powder. But I was getting a hit of some sort from the cocoa in there. And Dr. Fuhrman told me, stop immediately. Do not have any cocoa powder for 2 weeks.
Mm.
Sometimes it only takes about 2 weeks to break something it's not a terrible habit, but if you continue doing it, it's going to end up to be not so good. So sometimes you need to just stop. Okay, for 2 weeks, I'm going to, just limit my beans here just for 2 weeks and see if that doesn't tame it back down a little bit. But that's what I did with the cocoa powder. I've never been addicted to chocolate since. I don't like cocoa powder. I never went back to it after that.
What are some biblical principles or biblical quotes or something like that that can help me and help others in this kind of trying to think about what we're putting into our bodies?
I think, you know, this is I joke about this, but it's um there's no verse in the Bible that says thou shalt not eat donuts, but um there's the reference I'm going to have to give to you later, but it talks there. Paul talks about, all things are beneficial. No, all things you can have all things, but not everything's beneficial. And I think, we've got to get into our minds that sure, I can have a variety of foods. I can have donuts. I can have pastries, but is it the most beneficial for me? And also in Corinthians 10:13, um, no temptation has overtaken us, but that is common to man, that he provides, Jesus has made a way of escape for every temptation. And I think we're not in the habit of fleeing temptation, and I think there's always, if you look, every time you have a temptation, there's always a way out of that temptation if we look for it. Now, if we don't look for it, we can go in, but the power of God within us, with Jesus in us, we have power over the flesh. And that's a crucial point to this whole thing. The flesh is powerful. We cannot fight the flesh our own. We don't have the willpower to fight the flesh. We don't have the psychology to fight the flesh. It's only the power of God that has power over the flesh. And so, those times, I have an example. This summer, I was in Philadelphia. I was in a training in a hotel, and I was really hungry at night, about 9 o'clock at night. The hotel food just was really sparse, and I was really hungry. And I remember in the elevator, going down, I was in the elevator by myself, and I just cried out. I wanted to go to a vending machine and get a Cliff Bar. They're not super bad, but they're not super good for you. And I just said, Jesus, this is harder than me. Help me, because my flesh wanted that Cliff Bar so bad. But in the fitness room, there were some apples and oranges, a big bowl of them. And the Lord just empowered me. I got off that elevator and I went to that fitness room and got a couple apples and an orange. And I tell you what, that satisfied me. I didn't even care for the Cliff Bars, but in that moment, I cried out for help. And I think a lot of times as Christians, we don't cry out for help in the midst of temptation. We think, oh, well, I can just have it. But if we stop at that moment and cry out for help, the Lord always strengthens us to overcome and to flee that temptation.
It makes sense. I think I could pray for myself a lot more. I feel more comfortable praying for everyone else.
Sure.
Just what you did is
Yes.
great. Help me.
Help me. I'm the one that needs help right now. And he helps us in that moment. And there's always, I tell everybody, there's always a way of escape. It wouldn't be in the Bible if there wasn't, but we're promised there's always a way of escape, but we have to look for that way of escape. And in the heat of the battle, there's an escape hatch. Our flesh doesn't need to win.
I like it. It's making me think of the Israelites, or I guess I should say Jews, fleeing Egypt, and in the parting of the Red Sea. Like
Absolutely.
if God can part the Red Sea, He's going to help
Yes.
find a way to escape our
Yes.
affliction too. If we
Right. And I am convinced. I mean, I've done this now 11 years. I've interviewed people all over the United States, really all over the world, in Australia, England. I am convinced nobody can tell me otherwise, that food either has the power to destroy our bodies or it has the power to give life to our bodies. And I just, with all my heart, believe that God has created these fruits and vegetables for our benefit. And, it's there for us to enjoy and to, restore our health by eating well.
I want to talk about some things that aren't in your book, but that just are on my mind. And since, from Christian to Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're pro-life. We're both pro-life.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And, from cradle to the grave, or actually from conception to the grave, right? Would you?
Yes, I agree with that totally. Yes.
And so what about, I think, what about our own life? What about our own health? And we can either really, we can end up with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. We can end up with some kind of cardiovascular disease. We can end up with just stroke, something that debilitates us so that other people have to take care of us, which to me seems a little rude and selfish. If we're just saying, oh, who cares? Whatever will happen, will happen. I think there's a morality here that people aren't talking about.
Yes.
And I know this isn't in your book or anything like that. I'm putting you on the spot here with something fresh, but I want to know your thoughts about this.
It's funny you bring this up, because about 5 years ago, I thought the same thing. I thought, and I'm very pro-life from conception on, but I thought, okay, we have babies, and then when they're toddlers, we're feeding them sugar cereal and causing them, children now are having prediabetes. Children, teenagers are having strokes. Young adults are having heart attacks. We're causing premature death in their 20s, 30s, 40s. So, in one side of the coin, we're fighting for their life until birth. And then on the other side of the coin, we're dropping the ball and we don't really care about their life. Not that we don't care. We still care about human life. But it seems like we're not getting it as far as we're encouraging premature death by the foods that we're really stressing. And I think churches I'm sorry for getting off on this tangent, but I just got back from a marriage retreat this weekend, and it was a wonderful retreat, but the food was just very heart disease promoting, very diabetic promoting, everything. Young couples there, with little toddlers who, had a weekend away from their children and are just eating that food, and it's causing all kinds of, health issues. So I'm pro-life all the way till death. I know that's radical, but I'm pro-life until death. I mean, a death at age 90, 95, 100, not, a premature death. And, by having a son who died prematurely, it's really a sad, kids are dying. And I don't think in America we're understanding there's a lot more kids dying in their 20s now
Right.
than we've ever seen before. So I believe the church has a responsibility to step up to the plate and be pro-life. Even, let's provide the foods that encourage us to live and not encourage a premature death.
I agree. I think people think it's kind to give children candy or ice cream. I see I watched some old TV shows from Desilu Studios. One in mind comes to mind, like Family Affair is one. It's kind of cute little show. But, it's always a big thing to take the kids in these shows for ice cream. And it's like they're having a down day. But hey, let's go get some ice cream. It's just kind of like the loving parental thing to do, for example. And I just think people are confused. I see it, and in my heart, I feel so sad because now I know that this is setting up a whole culture of us really killing ourselves.
Exactly. And I think we need to recondition our brains here what treats are. It's not a treat to have your chest cut open with bypass surgery. It's not a treat for kids to be injecting themselves with insulin. It's not a treat to have cavities to where your teeth rot out. That's not, and I think we need to, reframe what treats are. Treats are feeling good, treats are having a healthy body and feeling good to be able to play. So, I think that's the whole treat thing. I grew up with treats, and I think that has become, we can still give rewards, but maybe not food related, maybe there's other ways to give treats.
Yeah, do you have more to say about that, about the reward, food as a reward?
Yes, I think number one, I think that's the one of the roots of our whole epidemic here in the United States. We have taken food out of its context. Food is created by God to fuel our bodies, period. We need fuel. This is energy. This gives us healing properties to restore our cells, to keep going. And as a culture, we have turned food into everything but nourishment. And I just think we've got to get back to food is nourishment, and don't even go there that it's a treat, because it's not. I mean, it's very pleasurable. Even healthy food is very pleasurable to eat. But when we're using it as the reward system all over, McDonald's Happy Meals, everywhere, and I think it's systematic. As a culture, we're all going to need to change. Just like, 30 years ago, people were smoking cigarettes everywhere. And it was even 50 years ago, physicians were smoking cigarettes. And it took a long time, but now there's not as many people smoking cigarettes because the entire culture got educated on the dangers of tobacco and smoking. And I think it's going to take the culture getting educated to where it's something across, the schools are supporting it, the churches are supporting it, homes are supporting it. So, we don't have access to all this food for children, all these treats. And, it's got to start. I remember years ago, we were at a church where if you said a Bible verse correctly, you got a pack of lifesavers because Jesus is our lifesaver.
Mm.
You know, and that was the reward for saying Bible verses. And so I think we've got to get this reward. Food is to fuel our bodies, and we got to find other ways to give rewards to children and to ourselves.
I appreciate that. I've never heard it put that way before. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see the art behind you, and can you tell
Yeah.
us about that art? And I mean, you have a bachelor's in fine arts and art as related to your addiction and recovery.
Yes, actually I have been an artist since I say I grew up with a paintbrush in my hand more than a pencil. I grew up painting wall murals, and then I ended up going to college studying art. I, I paint everything from, this is actually, I'll tell you about this. I didn't mean to tell you about my art. Um, that's called intercession. That's prayers. There was a season I went through where I'd turn on worship music and just paint the music, what was stirring inside my heart. So I have a whole bunch of paintings, but that's called intercession, and this is called pots and flowers, and I love to just paint anything that has life, flowers. I've always been that way. Well, and it's always been my goal, my lifetime goal, to produce significant works of art in my lifetime. And in 2006, I was over in Italy. A local college took a group of people over to study the art renaissance, and we saw all the cathedrals. We saw everything over there. And when I was looking at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, it just hit me that I would never think of smearing mud on the Sistine Chapel. I just could never do that. But here I was smearing mud every day on my body, which is a significant work of art that God created, but I was just smearing mud every day on it by the foods I was putting in it. So I felt really incongruent as an artist. Like, here I want to make beautiful works of art, but I'm destroying the work of art that God created. And so it wasn't until I decided in 2008 that I would use food as my artistic medium. It would be the paint, my body would be the canvas, and I would basically redo the canvas that I had messed up. So, it was full of mud. And, within 1 year, I got it back to where it was supposed to be. I didn't have blood pressure issues anymore. I didn't have diabetic issues anymore. I didn't have heart disease. From the inside out, I restored my body. So that's where I'm passionate now as an artist, especially as an artist. We're naturally experimenters. We like to see whether it's a potter experimenting with different glazes, or a sculptor experimenting with different kinds of metals. We like to experiment. And so as an artist, it's like, well, I wonder what food can do to my body. And so it was fun. That's how I used it as an art exhibit. And it's an online art exhibit called Transformation. And that's
Where is that? Where's that located?
It's at my website, emilyboller.com, and there's a little menu thing at the side, and Transformation is the art exhibit. Basically, what I did is I documented my changing images from month to month as my body was changing. I documented what was happening on the inside of my body too, by my blood pressure, my blood work. And so it was fun. And then I journaled on there too. So it was fun to see how my body changed that year, and how food really does have the power to make art,
And I know that there's a connection between ProLife and your art. Can you share that with us?
Sure. We have a large pro-life group here in Fort Wayne, my hometown. And for years, I participated in their fundraiser every year as an artist. I painted furniture. I donate a jewelry box painted, or they had some auctions. And then one year, for the whole state of Indiana, there was a print I made of Jesus holding a baby. And Jesus is crying, and he's comforting that baby. And it ended up being really a pro-life drawing. And the whole state of Indiana then used that as a fundraiser. I forget now what they sold it for, but it was basically a donation to the pro-life, in the whole state. Every town had their own fundraiser. And so thousands, I forget how many I donated, but I just kept printing them off. So
I want to get back to your book.
sure.
Kind of like a little last mention of your book, Starved to Obesity, from Emily Boller. You can see how to spell her name here. It's Boller, and she has a website, emilyboller.com, where you can see about her art, see about her book. Right, I don't know what you'll have up there when this releases, but as we record, there's a PDF I think they can download. Is that right now?
Yes, it's there's one. It's basically the 7 commonalities of those who escape food addiction. So they can get that.
Very helpful.
Yes.
And is there, I don't know, I know you have some recipes. Can you talk about maybe one recipe that you make on a regular basis?
Yes. I think one of the staples here, you talk about beans, but one of the staples I like is I actually, can I show my pants real quick? These are the pants I wore the day I started this. This is like, but anyhow, yeah, they fit me too, What I like to do is I usually cook 2 packages of these. These are 1-pound bags of garbanzo beans. I put 2 of them in a big crock pot, and then I fill them up with just enough water to cover them about 2 inches, and I cook them either on low all day, 8 hours, or on high for 4 hours. And I love to just put garlic and lemon, drain the water out and put it in a food processor and make hummus. And I put spices in there, lemon. I don't put fat in it at all. I just do lemon and spices and garlic. And I then spread those on collard leaves with some onion, with some tomatoes. I spread it on cabbage leaves. I roll them up, and I love those for a meal. They're just very filling. And some people think, oh, I can't do this, but that's really for me a fast food. I can eat it on the go. I don't have to sit down. I can roll those up like a burrito and eat those. Those are really a nice.
Yeah, I like that. Like you mentioned, fast food. There's so many good foods. There's no shortage. There's gourmet foods we can make if we want. There's fast foods. There's quick foods. Just whatever you want. This diet is so versatile.
This is real quick too. This is a trick for those. My husband, who loves these, I do too. You just take a bag of frozen cherries and a bag of frozen pineapple, put them in a Vitamix or any high-speed blender, and you have the best sorbet. Just 2 bags, and that makes, in the summer especially, that makes a nice, after dinner little dessert.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yes.
Well, Emily, we ran out of time. I just want to thank you again for spending time with us today. Thank you so much.
Yes, my pleasure. God bless your audience and you.
Thank you. God bless you too.
Yes, thank you.
You've been listening to the Healing and Peace Show. I'm licensed marriage and family therapist Thomas Schmier, and you can find out more about my services, which include worldwide services for life coaching, Catholic family, and life coaching. And, I'm inspired by Dr. Fuhrman. So if you want to do some work that's surrounding a food addiction or even anorexia or something like that, I can do that through therapy. And my therapy services are available in about 6 states, California being one of them. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to my website, healingandpeace.com. And if you want to keep informed of future show guests and topics, you can subscribe to my blog at healingandpeace.com/blog. And then you can also find all of my social media handles at healingpeace.com or healingandpeace.com/blog. Thank you for watching today. And until next time, may God bless you with healing and peace.